Just going live, directors. Good afternoon, directors and staff, members of the public. My name is Jake Martins. I'm the Deputy Corporate Legislative Officer for the Comox Valley Regional District, and I'm pleased to call this inaugural meeting of the Regional Parks and Trails Committee to order. I'll first recognize that we are conducting our business today on the traditional unceded territory of the Comox First Nation. At the inaugural meeting, we do conduct the elections for the chair and vice chair positions for the year. This process is guided by the CVRD Procedure Bylaw number 1. And the process is conducted by first seeking nominations of a director for any of those two positions. Any director may put forward another director's name for consideration, and should there be more than two directors or more than one director nominated, an election by secret ballot will be conducted. A director to be elected must receive a majority of the ballots cast, unless there is a tie, 2 consecutive ties, in which case we will look for a resolution from the board to either start the process over again or to draw by lots. With that, are there any questions from the directors on the process at all before we begin? Seeing none, thank you very much. So we'll start with the position of chair, and I will call a first time for nominations for that position. Director McCollum.
I'd like to nominate Director Arbor.
Thank you. And I will call a second time for position of chair, and I will call a third and final time for the position of chair. Just taking nominations for the position of chair, calling the third and final time. Seeing no further comments. Director Arbor, do you allow your name to stand? Thank you. It is confirmed in the affirmative. And with that, I'm pleased to announce you as chair for the Regional Parks and Trails Committee for 2023. Before I turn over the seat to you, we'll just conduct the elections for vice chair for the committee. And so same process, I'll start by calling a first time for nominations for the position of vice chair. Director Cole Hamilton.
Yeah, thanks. I'd like to nominate Director Morin.
Morin, thank you. I'll call a second time for nominations for the position of vice chair. And I'll call a third and final time for any nominations. Seeing no further nominations, Director Morin, do you allow your name to stand? Thank you. And Director Morin's confirmed in the affirmatives. And with that, I'm pleased to announce you acclaimed as vice chair for 2023. With that, thank you for your participation and patience with this process. And I'll now turn it over to Chair Arbor to conduct the rest of the meeting.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone, and good afternoon. I'd like to begin the meeting, obviously, by acknowledging that we are conducting this meeting in this traditional territory of the Comox First Nation, who have stewarded these lands for time immemorial. And obviously, this new committee will be involved in many issues and opportunities relating to the lands and water of the region. So we should be grateful to be here. I just have a couple comments before we start the meeting. I was part of a small group of directors in the last term, and some of you, quite a few of you were around this table, following the failure of securing Stoughton Falls that really pushed for investigating regional park service. And it's really great to see that that process has now become a reality with each of you sitting at this table. I want to say that parks are interesting. In my background, in my master's, I actually studied the colonial legacy of parks and the colonial background of parks, but also the new opportunities that exist around them. In the early 2000s, I was involved with an initiative in Clayoquot Sound to create the Hahokumin Travel Park with the Tlaoquech First Nations. And so there's different ways to look at parks as we embark on this work as a region. So obviously, as I'm sure each of you believe, there will be a need to engage Comox First Nation early and often on this new body of work. As your chair, I commit to meet with you whenever you want, because over the next 14 months, we'll go through a strategic planning process, and that will set the stage for the next decades of work around the future of regional parks. So thank you for listening to me for a couple of minutes. And with that, I'll just ask for, are we going to public input?
Sure.
Thank you. Over to staff.
Thank you very much, Chair and Directors. And for those that are unfamiliar with the regional district's process for the financial plan, we will be presenting a financial plan for regional parks at this meeting. We provide an opportunity for public input. In the event that we receive input from the public relative to this service, we'll bring those matters forward. At this time, we have none. But for members of the public that are watching, it is important to receive your considerations. And for those items that you want input on the regional parks, it will be shared with this body who provides advice to the board. So nothing further to report at this time, other than just to reference all materials with respect to the budget process are available on our website.
Thank you very much, CEO. Any questions for staff on this one? We will just still move receipt and second. So mover for second. Thanks, Dr. Grieve and Mayor Brown, or Dr. Brown, alternative. And all in favor? Thank you. Next is the financial plan for the Regional Parks and Trail Service, function 625 for receipt. Thank you. And second, over to staff.
Thank you, Chair and Directors. And Mark Harrison is here to present the financial plan. He's supported by our financial staff too. So we're available for any questions that you may have with respect to the service and what's proposed in the budget.
Thank you, Russell. Mr. Chair, I'm here to present the inaugural 2023 to 2027 financial plan for the Regional Parks and Trails Service function 625. So just to give an overview, the purpose of this service as per the Service Establishment Bylaw, which is Bylaw 719, the purpose was really twofold. And that was, first of all, to protect regionally significant natural areas while providing opportunities for public access and enjoyment. And secondly, to develop a network of greenways and trails. So really, this service is about benefiting the region as a whole. So, on that, I just wanted to just quickly bring up the Parks and Protected Areas spectrum, which you'll see in the bottom corner of the PowerPoint. And it really differentiates the community parks, regional parks, provincial parks, and national parks. And really, that's a spectrum. So on the left-hand side, community parks are generally a small service area. They're generally smaller in size. And as you move right along that spectrum, you end up with a larger service area, generally parks that are larger in size. So, what we have here is a brand new service. It's different and distinct, separate from the existing community park services that we have within our region. So those are our municipal park services and our electoral area community park services. So once we move into the community park is usually a neighborhood scale. It provides passive or active recreation opportunities. And once you kind of move into the regional parks, you're usually it's a larger scale, and then it benefits the region as a whole. And generally, you're moving into more naturalized areas, and then so on along the spectrum. So just making that point that it is a separate and distinct service is important at this stage. In terms of community partnerships, I think it's at the core of this service. Each of the local governments are participants in this service. In terms of tax impact, we're looking at a proposed tax impact of $7.12 per property assessed at a value of $800,000, and that works out to be 0.0089 per thousand of assessed value. So an 8.9 of a cent. In terms of the CAP, this is a new service. It has no infrastructure. So at this point, at this stage, it has no direct impact on the corporate energy and emissions plan. In terms of 2023, our work plan priorities are, as the chair mentioned, was really the delivery of the Regional Parks and Trails strategic plan. And then if we have time, getting into the land acquisition strategy. So the Regional Parks and Trails strategic plan is really the foundational document for this service. It's meant to identify a vision for this service, the types of regional parks and trails that we wish to establish. It sets our long-term goals and our actions for this service, and it really forms that framework for decision-making. And it clarifies the intent of this service for all the local government participants, for our First Nation partners, and for the public at large. I did put up a conceptual 2023-2024 work plan, workflow. Obviously, this it will change once we actually bring on a consultant, but basically what we want to do is issue an award request for proposal. Likely will take a few months for that. And then once we actually have a consultant in place to deliver the strategic plan, look at plan development and look at our engagement pieces. So that engagement will be with Comox First Nation, obviously, with our other stakeholders, with the public, with this committee itself, and all our internal local government reviews. That will likely be a 6-month process. We'll then get into actually refining the plan, and that will be some more Comox First Nation reviews, this committee review, external referrals and such, likely 4 months in that for that box. And then we'll get into our kind of final strategic plan, and that will include presentations to each of the local governments. Once that's concluded, it will then have that plan in place, and that will inform the land acquisition strategy, which is really a document that will provide a deeper dive into the acquisition process, criteria, specific priorities, funding mechanisms, and such. So in terms of the comparative budget, obviously there was no budget last year. So for the 2023, what we're proposing is a requisition of $275,000, which is what was proposed in the background study and what was really discussed and approved as part of the service establishment process. In terms of expenditures, there would be personnel costs of just over $93,000. We'll have operating costs of just over $154,000. That's basically the strategic plan and land acquisition strategy in there. We'd have contributions to reserve of just over $5,000 that would go into the FE reserve, which is there to help mitigate for unforeseen circumstances and liabilities. And then in terms of the transfer to other functions, that $21,000 is a transfer to the feasibility services that we used to establish the service. So with that, I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Mark. Any questions on the inaugural budget? Dr. Grieve. Oh, need to go somewhere. Director McCollum.
The other side of the table. Yeah, I had a couple small questions about some of the numbers in the budget. One was just around the personnel costs. It's $93,000 line item, and it says that the salaries and wages are $66,000 roughly, and another $6,000 for remuneration. I'm just wondering what makes up the other $20,000. Is that?
Good stuff.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. The remainder of that would be for benefits, which is just over $17,000, and there's a health tax in there of just $1,600, and then WCB $1,800. So it's those benefits piece.
Okay, thanks. The other question I had is just around. I'm supportive of what we've decided for the requisition amount. But I'm curious why we're budgeting for the strategic plan, the land acquisition strategy, as opposed to putting that into reserves this year if we're not expecting to complete the strategic plan until 2024. Just wanted to understand what the timing of that's going to look like.
Yeah, Mr. Chair. We weren't really sure of the timing, and once we kind of did a bit of a deeper dive to figure out how long the process was actually going to take, then we realized that we're looking at probably a 14-month process. That what we budgeted was 75,000 for the actual strategic plan. I think the reality is that that's going to be probably on the low end. I'm expecting the strategic plan will likely come in at 75 to 100,000 based on conversations that I've had with other parks managers. So I think for now, if we could have it in there, what we don't use could just go into reserves at the end of the year.
Makes sense. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. McCollum. Dr. Grieve.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through the staff. I would take issue that there's no impact on our climate action plan. Obviously, green spaces, greenways and parks have a very positive effect on absorbing greenhouse gas emissions. We also have a great big peat bog that we didn't really expect to own that turns out is 7 times more effective in soaking carbon than even our green forests. So I'm thinking it's a good thing.
Thanks for those good words, Dr. Grieve. Dr. Mayer.
Thank you. This is so great. Really exciting to see it coming together. I'm wondering if setting aside a bit of budget to support First Nations participation was considered.
Thank you. Over to staff, and let me have additional comments on that one.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, obviously the participation of Comox First Nation is paramount for this for the strategic planning process. That 75,000 was meant to capture the engagement pieces, which was meant to capture the First Nation engagement with Comox.
Thank you, and maybe I could put that one in new business unless it affects budget, but I was going to ask if there's intent by staff to either invite KFN Chief and Council to have a member here or as part of this process. It's not very often we launch a service that is of that level of significance to the lands and waters, so I was wondering if staff had given consideration to that or whether we should save it for a separate item.
I think the intention is for us to go to Chief and Council and say, here's the regional parks plan, the regional parks process, really with an open book to hear from them. And not only what input they have in the process, but how they wish to participate in the process. So we'll come back to this committee to advise if that includes membership or remuneration. If there's a need for expenses to be covered or anything of that nature, we'll definitely come back to you with the input that we receive.
Thank you. That's helpful. Dr. Mayer, subsequent.
Thank you. Yeah, somewhat related, just thinking about because this work is going to be hopefully very much in partnership with First Nations, there may be an additional need for training and support, cultural safety and humility training. So just wondering if we might want to set some money aside for that as well.
Staff, do you believe the 75,000 leaves some margins to initiate those kinds of activities?
For the time being, we're also supported by the greater board, the regional district itself, that's having a lot of the conversations on the broader engagement with Comox First Nation. So certainly it's not just a role of this service, but you are supported by the greater board and the initiatives that we have in place as well.
Thank you. Good question. And then, staff, one further comment on that one? Yeah. Oh, you're good. Okay. Thank you. Are there further questions on budget, our inaugural budget? There being none, all in favor of the budget? Sorry, receipt. I'm rusty. I haven't done that in a few months. So vote on receipt. All in favor? All in favor. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Grieve. Second, Cole Hamilton, that the proposed operating financial plan for the regional parks and trail service function 625 be approved. Any questions, comments? If not, all in favor? Thank you. Thank you, Grieve and Moray. That staff be directed to bring forward the appropriate bylaws to establish both a future expenditures reserve and a capital works reserve for the Regional Parks and Trail Service Function 625. Questions or comments on this motion? There being none, all in favor? Okay, thank you. That passes. So next for receipt is the Regional Parks and Trail Strategic Plan Scope of Services. For receipt, Mayor and Cole Hamilton, over to staff.
Thank you very much, Chair and Directors. And before I turn it over to Mark Harrison, I just wish to apologize for a mistake that I made in proofing this report. I didn't pick up on stakeholders, the reference to Comox First Nation being a stakeholders. They are not stakeholders. They are their own form of government. So I missed that. My apologies. And I also wish to thank Director Hardy for pointing that out, and the report or the request for proposals has been corrected to reflect that. So Mark will just proceed with talking about the RFP and the process here with the recommendation. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Chessel. To the chair, in an attempt to be basically proactive and get the timeline moving a little bit quicker on our request for proposal here and our strategic plan. Staff are seeking support for this scope of services that will basically drive the delivery of the Regional Parks and Trails strategic plan. So that strategic plan is aiming to firstly examine and evaluate our current plans, our gaps, the trends with regional parks, the challenges and those opportunities. It's aiming to define the fundamental purpose, the goals of this service, determine our general acquisition priorities, to develop an implementation plan, to develop a service model for planning, for development, and for operations, and to identify our costs and our funding models. So really our foundational document to guide service delivery. As Russell alluded to, we did staff did make an error in terms of the scope of services, and for that I apologize. Again, Comox First Nation is not a stakeholder, but they are a nation, they're a government, and they're a partner, and a very critical partner in the success of this service. It is important to know that they will decide at how they wish to engage with this, and their engagement will be the starting point of this process. So based on that, the scope that I'm presenting here today, we are looking at approximately a 14-month process, strategic planning process. Happy to take any questions if you have on the scope of services.
Thanks, staff, and thanks for a very detailed scope of services proposal. Questions or comments, observations on what is being proposed? Director Cole Hamilton.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to get a sense of what sort of circling back will happen by the parties who are drafting the report to the committee here. It speaks of our involvement as providing input on drafts as it moves along. Do you have a sort of a sense of what our engagement process will be as this is developed?
Yeah, Mr. Chair. At this point, I don't. I think that's really going to be up to the consultant to give us a plan on how he wishes to engage with this committee. But there'll definitely be the draft plan, developing the vision, for this service, the mission statement. Those key goals and deliveries will really be a key piece for this committee to help deliver.
Okay, so it'll be the consultant. I would assume that we'll also have some input on when we'll be getting sort of a chance to refer to drafts and review them.
Yeah, that's correct.
And I'm assuming because it's drafts plural, that will probably be more than one opportunity during that 14-month period.
I would expect so, yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cole Hamilton. Dr. Grant.
Yeah, thank you. I might have asked this before, but I'm just wondering if there was a really good piece of land that would make a great regional park, but it happens to be within one of the municipalities, would that be considered, or is that what we're going to figure out throughout this process? And I have another thought as it regards to trailways. We've got some really great biking areas out, especially in Area B and some of the other areas, but they don't really they would be trailways, I guess. Is that the kind of thing that we could, you'd need to get, highways department involved with it too. So is that going to be hashed out during the scoping exercise, or
Great
how
question.
would we deal with that?
Staff.
Yeah, through the chair. Definitely all lands within the regional district will be considered as part of this regional service. So the municipal boundaries won't play a part in deciding what is important lands for regional parks and regional trails. In terms of the existing trails or how we're going to approach regional trails, I think that's something that will get discussed through the scoping process. And obviously, this committee will have a huge input on that.
No, thanks, Doctor. And you're bringing back some conversations we had initially, because it could go from just brand new parks to the seal bays of the world, or the all of the private land, forest lands. Like, the scope is yet to be determined. That will be our work the next 14 months. Dr. Brown.
Thank you. Yeah, I similarly, there's a line there about differentiating the roles and responsibility of regional parks and trails service from that of electoral areas community park service. But I think it's also important to differentiate the roles and responsibility of municipal regional parks in that same conversation, so that there's a scale. There's lots of regional parks in Cumberland that are.
Yeah, can you expand a bit on that? For example, the community forests and those.
Yeah, like I think it's important for us and the public and whoever else is engaging with this process to understand that there are already regional parks here that are not part of the service, that may or may not ever be part of the service, and differentiating those from municipal parks and other parks that are here.
Thanks. And if I can rephrase your question for Mark, can you speak to how existing regionally profiled parks will be addressed as part of the strategic plan?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, really that's going to be part of this whole exercise, part of the strategic planning process, and will really be up to this committee to guide that.
Thank you. Thanks. Good question, Dr. Brown. Back to Dr. Mayer. No, you disappeared.
There we go. Sorry. I am really curious. There is a particular community partner in the Comox Valley Land Trust and Conservation Partnership who I think may have a lot of input into this work, but I'm not seeing beyond the general engagement a bigger role for them in the way this is currently laid out. So maybe my question is there room to reassess the role of key partners through this process?
Over to staff.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, we tried to keep the stakeholders as broad as possible. I don't think at this stage we want to name and ask for specific partner stakeholders within this RFP. But I think something like that's going to be identified through the strategic planning process. And I know the CVLT is obviously a key stakeholder within our region, and they will certainly be identified as such.
Thank you.
That's okay. Thank you. Dr. Hardy, did you have your lights on? That's okay. Thank you. Back to Dr. Brown.
Thank you. The scope outlines 4 public engagement sessions, which I appreciate. I assume these are in-person engagement sessions. I wonder if we could also add an electronic option, a survey of some sort, so that people who are unable to make it out to those sessions can also contribute.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion. Mark?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, under that bullet, the public extensive public engagement piece, there is a bullet there that notes an online survey to gather public feedback and support as well.
Right underneath. Thanks.
Thanks. However, that was my only question as a non-chair, if you will, for today. I did notice the 4 sessions. There's 3 of them proposed in each of the municipalities and 1 at the CVRD building. I would like to see us going out in the rural communities. A lot of the potential for these parks and the knowledge of the land exists in those communities. I don't presume that people in Fanny Bay or Black Creek will travel to the CVRD building for this. There may be a different way to address that rather than send a consultant into every area. Everyone's got either a farmer's market or something like that. It could be just that we bring a booth, even it could be our staff or something like that, but some way to capture engagement in those communities where from Fanny Bay to Black Creek, where many of the parks could arise in the future. Is that something that would be possible within the scope of service?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, that's certainly something we can look at and we can add to the scope.
Thank you. And further comments on the scope? Okay, well, that was a comprehensive report, so that's appreciated for a first meeting. Voting on receipt, all in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. And a second, please, for the recommendation. Thank you. I'll get Director Murray. That staff be directed to proceed with the issuance of a request for proposal for regional parks and trail strategic plan based on the scope of services as outlined in the staff report and subject to the approval of the operating financial plan for the regional parks and trail service. All in favor? And that's unanimous as well. And with that, we'll contemplate termination. Grant and Mayor, all in favor? Thank you. See you in a couple of months, everybody, and thanks to staff.